And today we are very fortunate to have with us three wonderful speakers, Professor Dr. Azizi, Professor Dr. Kipli, and Dr. Zaimi Sahibil, who, as you have heard just now, spoke on cultural and heritage from three perspectives, from architecture, ritual and performance, and also from the anthropological and customs and traditions. So without further ado, we'd like to invite all three gentlemen to join us today for a little talk. Please. Thank you. First question is for you, Professor Azizi. Can you tell us a little about the house you grew up in?
Hi everyone. I have a big family. There are 7 siblings in the family. My father built his own house. It was a very long house with 5 bedrooms, 1 big kitchen and 2 bathrooms. But it was on his own effort. So we have our own spaces in there, and then it's quite a big area around the house where we plant a lot of soursop trees, mango trees, rambutan trees. So again, that's the idea where I got all that from, how to become an architect. So because back then, my father showed me the way where I should go in a way that I'm being inspired by him. So it's quite a big house for 7 of us, plus the parents, 9 of us. And a few cats.
And a few cats.
Yeah. You used to have about 12 cats.
12?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Could you elaborate again for us, specifically in cultural heritage work from an architectural point of view?
Of that house? Mm-hmm. Okay. It was done in such a, with the proper tropical house design, where the house was built on stilts, being lifted above the ground about 5 or 6 feet above the ground to allow ventilation underneath the house. We also had a lot of windows, and my brother should know about it because every evening during Maghrib prayer time, when it got so dark, we got so scared of going around the house to close the windows. So he will accumulate everyone, he will gather every one of us to follow him to close all the windows because he was so scared to get from the front of the house to the back of the kitchen because it's all facing this jungle at the back, actually. So that's how the factors of the tropical house design is already there. We have a lot of openings on stilts and a sloping roof, a lot of ventilation, also veranda for the male domain. Yeah, it's all there. So, but we did have what I call it, almost like a Malacca house made of concrete, concrete steps, which is, again, I don't know where it came from, but anyway, it's part of the architecture as a tropical design. Okay,
Thank you, Dr. Azizi. And I would like to jump to Dr. Kipli, please. And speaking of animism, which is really quite a fascinating subject, shamanistic practices, of course, and of course, Dr. Zaimi will be able to contribute to that also. See, there are many. Excuse me. Animism, as they say, is the belief that everything possesses a soul, and it's considered widely as one of the earliest religions on earth. And how do you think, because we have a multitude of cultural heritage yielded from various races and ethnic groups. So to fully comprehend the implied cultural heritage, one must first know the meaning of cultural heritage. Could you expand on this, please, for us?
Cultural heritage, actually, the culture is everyday life is a culture. Okay, everyday culture is the food culture, the design culture, and then how do we live, it's all the culture, but my focus in the intangible cultural heritage. So I look at the ritual performances is part of the culture as well, because that is how do they live. Because ritual performances is actually they do every day. Yeah, it's a daily life of that community that I studied on. So it is cultural and it is heritage, because heritage it is passed down from one generation to another. We inherit the culture. So it is a culture. So performing art is a culture, ritual is a culture, and it is also involved the culture of how to eat, the adat istiadat, the custom, the taboo, everything is in the ritual. So everything is there, like Sugih just now, Dr. Zaimi said, Sugih is also the taboo. If you do wrong, man, you have to be fined. Sugih is fine, like you kena denda. You kena denda is the Sugih. So you cannot do this, you cannot do this, so they have the undang-undang adat istiadat that they have to follow. So that is heritage. That is heritage, and that is a culture. Culture, how do they live? That is how do they live? Our ancestors live. It exists in all the communities, regardless race and regardless frontier. So it is a culture. Oh, you want to add?
Yes, yeah. According to the Orientalist Edward Said, culture is very dynamic. Okay, it moves all the time. It changes all the time, because even in Malaysia, we see that from the back then, our society has changed because of a new influence of cultures coming in. If you say that you don't change, that's wrong, because you change every day. So although your basic is Malay culture, but your interpretation of what you see every day is changing. If you go abroad, your mind's open to a different culture. Again, you bring a good one coming in, and then you adapt it into your own culture. So the culture changes. Although you say you're Malay, but you're not. In a sense, because, for example, if, like me, I'm considering myself a Malay. And I go abroad. When I went abroad, I went to America, I went to the UK to study. My perception of cultures has changed because of the influence from different cultures. Again, you always bring back the good ones to maybe enhance your own culture. So again, the culture is not fixed, it's very dynamic. That's my answer.
But the roots, of course,
rules, yes,
are the same.
Yeah, rules are the same, but the way you adapt it, or you, what I call it, assimilate it, or you, what's the word, improvise, that's the word, because culture is also about improvisation, where you move and move and move again, you know, it's not fixed. The rules are still the same, but again, rules are meant to be broken.
Dr. Zaimi?
Talk about the culture, especially in Sabah, Borneo, I think so. Di Sabah kita ada undang-undang adat yang melangkaui common law. So careful lah kalau masuk ke pedalaman Sabah. So dia akan terpakai sebab dia ada ketua anak negeri. Example my brother selepas I, dia gadis di kampung tu suka dia. And then adat di situ tak boleh dekat. So what gadis ni, adik saya lalu jembatan kat kampung I, dia ambil kain pelikat, kain sarung. Dia circle kan, and dia kejar adik saya, dia masukkan dalam gelung tu, and then bawa terjun. So I masih ingat, saya panggil dia tangkap basah lah. And then adat terpaksa dia kahwin, hanya perlakuan itu saja. So undang-undang adat terpakai di situ dan undang-undang common law, undang-undang syariah tidak terpakai. So betapa budaya berubah, tetapi di Sabah undang-undang law dia, rule dia tak berubah. Maybe di Sarawak juga. Okay, itu yang saya boleh share lah. Tapi Bajau Laut sekarang ni agak berubah. Soal undang-undang adat ni dia kurang sedikit. Tapi Bajau yang duduk di pesisir sungai dan juga pesisir pantai sangat kuat adat-adat. Masih.
Bercakap tentang komuniti Bajau Laut, ya, Dr. Zaimi, seperti yang dibentangkan dalam kertas kerja Dr. Zaimi tadi, apakah jangka hayat satu rumah Bajau Laut tu?
Okey, pada early sebenarnya masyarakat Bajau Laut ni tergolong dalam seni bina organik. ataupun rumah tradisi organik. Meaning organik dia cepat hilang. Okey, pada dasarnya yang awal, masyarakat bajau laut hanya tinggal bermusim dalam 6 hingga 7 bulan. Dari segi ketahanan ya, bila masyarakat dah mula menetap, rumah bajau laut sekarang ni dia boleh bertahan antara 10 hingga 15 tahun. Dan selepas itu, jika rumah ditinggalkan dan ada kematian, rumah tu dah tak boleh guna dah. So, ataupun rumah tu dah roboh ke terbakar, dia tidak boleh membina di tempat itu.
Di tempat yang serupa ya.
Dia kena ubah, walaupun hanya seinci daripada tiang tu kena move.
Kenapa ya Dr.
Sebab
Zaimi?
dia believe raw, contohlah kebakaran ataupun kematian, dia believe raw itu akan mula masuk balik ke rumah baru dan mengganggu masyarakat situ. So itu kalau kita lihat rumah bajau laut, before they start build the house, dia start tengok tajur muluk, tengok air pasang, angin dan sebagainya. So dia will start from the tiang di tengah, tiang seri, and then dia gantung botol, transparent botol, dia put water di dalam dan dia ikat dengan kain warna kuning. So dia tunggu beberapa hari, kalau air tu berkurangan level-level yang tertentu, so dia akan ubah, dia tidak mau buat kat situ. Tapi normally in scientific methods, air kena angin, cuaca mesti dia kurang kan. Tapi itu kepercayaan dia lah. Kedua, dia tengok, dia tutup by kain kuning. Kalau ada kotoran kat di dalam, dia percaya moron yang tu roh jahat kacau, dia pindah lagi lah. Tapi normal seperti saya cakap in scientific method, mungkin berlaku kekotoran di situ, tapi dia ada perkiraan lah. Itu yang sebenarnya berlaku lah. Okay, thank you.
Speaking of rituals, yeah, tadi, Dr. Zaimi. Now the questions for Dr. Kipli. In the Bajau Sama community, they fully entrust the shaman, as you said just now, as the one who is skilled and gifted with supernatural powers. Now, in traditional Malay text, this shaman acts as a mediator or the middle person between the physical and the metaphysical. Could you elaborate just a little bit more on this for us, please? And perhaps Dr. Azizi can contribute also.
BOMO is seperti yang Prof Azizi bagi tahu, BOMO sebagai satu institusi. BOMO tu dia adalah is a leader of the community. Dia adalah BOMO, dia adalah juga ketua kampung dan dia ketua adat dan dia juga adalah ketua ritual dan dia menjadi sumber rujukan untuk semua community.
Even bidang kampung pun dia juga.
Ya, bidang kampung pun dia juga. Itu tugas BOMO. So dia menjadi satu pusat. Sebab itu bila kita kata budaya kita adalah budaya matriarki, sebab macam dalam contoh Bobo Hizan, dia mesti perempuan. Jadi bila perempuan, yes mesti. Dia syaratnya cantik, perempuan dia mesti. Bila mesti makna perempuan become the leader. Perempuan menjadi sumber rujukan. So, sebab itu kita kata budaya kita, sebab itu saya sentiasa tidak bersetuju tentang pandangan feminis barat bahawa wanita di dunia ketiga ini lebih tertindas daripada wanita di barat. Saya tidak setuju. Bagi saya, wanita di negara ketiga, terutama di kawasan kita, mereka adalah pemimpin. The woman is a leader.
There is that demarcation of power.
Yes? Sebab itu saya menentang feminis di barat tentang statement itu bahawa kita tidak tertindas. Sebab dia menjadi satu dalam hierarki, dia adalah yang tertinggi lah. Saya nak kaitkan juga dengan the rules tadi kan, yang sentiasa berubah tadi. Sebenarnya ya ini berkaitan dengan sustainability. How do we sustain? Meaning that we have to change the rules. Macam umpamanya bila kita buat ritual kan dia ada sugi kena denda. So bila kita nak reinvent macam Mak Yong, dia dah reinvented by the palace. Reinvented sebab raja dia ada hak untuk mengubah. Sebab bila kita nak reinvent ritual performing arts ni, we have to get the consent from the performer. Are we allowed to change? And in terms of estetik akan berubah. Because dalam estetika tertinggi dalam seni persembahan tradisional is that the trance element. When you get into the trance, that is the highest aesthetic. It is different with the formal aesthetic. Formal aesthetic hanya melihat bentuk. Jadi bila kita ubah, estetik berubah. Estetik berubah. Estetik dalam traditional performing arts dia berkaitan dengan fungsi. Fungsi dia akan berkait dengan agak back to the religion, agama, animism dia.
So how can we begin to make these changes?
That is why kalau istana boleh buat, so sekarang ni bila kita nak reinvent, we have to get consent from the performer. So far untuk macam contoh kuda kepang mabuk, okay? Di Johor kuda kepang dia ada dua. One is tarian kuda kepang dance. The other one is permainan kuda kepang. So tarian kuda kepang itu adalah reinvention of the kuda kepang mabuk. Sebab permainan tu yang ada trans tu di permainan sebab itu macam diorang punya self defense lah. No, kita main-main dia, bukan serius. It's not serious. So tarian kuda kepang is only formal aesthetic. Dia tidak melibatkan mabuk. They will not get into the trance. But the permainan kuda kepang, you have to get into the trance. So itu perbezaan dia, mana dia berlaku reinvention, ubah. So ada consensus and consent from the performer, and the performer themselves that reinvented. But in the case of Ngalai Berasik, that is the only one left. So bagi based on my conversation with the informants, so diorang tak ada masalah untuk lakukan perubahan. Tak ada masalah. Cumanya yang ritual tetap dengan ritual bila untuk proses healing, mengubat. And then if you want to perform in the stage like Istana Budaya or Petronas, you can. There is no restriction. Sebab dalam yang you dah reinvent, maknanya dia tidak ada the concept of sugih anymore. Sugih is defined. You have to follow the rules. Meaning once you break the rules, and this is for the performance only. This is for healing purposes. So for the performance purposes, it's okay for entertainment. You tak ada kena sugih lah. Tak ada kena denda. So itu.
Dr. Azizi, I do know you would like to add on a little to this.
About reinvention. Okay, talking about the tropical design of architecture, okay? Reinvention has been done already. Okay, for example, I'm giving you the typical Malay house design. It's been done by Singapore for the high density buildings, where they invested about 64 million Sing dollars just to reinvent the Malay traditional house into the tall buildings in Singapore. It can be done. So, but the rules, like you say, the rules for tropical architecture, depending on the environment, what is needed for the natural ventilation, what is needed for the natural lighting, what is needed for whatever space planning. Those are the rules, technical rules for designing a house. But it can be applied in any way you can. So again, depending on how rich you are or how creative you are, I guess.
For example, like in visual dialects, there's a particular painting of an archetypal Malacca house.
Right.
Yes. So when you look at the designs, those mosaic designs,
right,
they originated from China.
Right.
Is that
correct?
correct?
Correct.
But since you also have a domicile over there,
Yeah.
could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, the tiles, back then when the traders came into Malacca, it was during the Malay Malacca Kingdom or Empire, where the traders brought in a lot of tiles or whatever, ceramics from China and cotton from India. So Malacca is like a hub for all these traders, where the influence can be seen in the architecture as well as the mosque, where in Malacca the mosques are mainly Chinese influence for example, like Tengkara Mosque. So this shows already the integration between different cultures. In Malacca, show the hybridity or the willingness of the people to accept other cultures into their own culture. Again, it created a Malacca culture rather than a Malay culture. Again, the culture changes already there back then. So the proof is shown in the Malacca, Tangga Malacca, yeah, the Malacca steps. So again, the tiles are from China.
Dr. Kipli, in the ongoing efforts, or may I use the word struggle here, to re-elevate traditional arts as a national heritage, how successful have we been, and what are the pertinent issues that we must first tackle?
Okay, seperti yang saya cakapkan tadi, untuk tujuan kajian ini dijalankan adalah untuk cuba mempromosikan persembahan itu dan cuba untuk mengangkatnya menjadi sebuah warisan negara. Tetapi dia bukan mudah kerana sesuatu itu kalau macam dalam akta warisan yang kita kaji ini termasuk dalam warisan negara, tetapi dia perlu dilakukan kajian. So tidak banyak kajian yang dijalankan terutamanya di sebelah Sabah dan Sarawak. Sebab di kat sana dia ada beribu-ribu lagi ritual performance. So saya hanya satu orang. Saya pergi ke situ. Even dulu saya pergi dengan Prof Azizi di Sarawak yang berbayuh itu. Tapi pertama dia sebagai satu yang tadi sebagai sebuah ritual untuk dia wujud sebagai sebuah ritual dengan fungsi yang sama itu agak sukar sebab generasi kini satu tadi tidak ada waris yang nak terima the concept of saka. Dia tak mahu terima saka. Kedua, kenapa dia perlu buat kalau untuk perubatan dia tidak memerlukan lagi ritual untuk berubat. Jadi bila sudah tidak ada waris, mana yang tua sudah tak ada, so dia akan hilang. Jadi kalau kita sempat lakukan kajian untuk dokumentasi, kita hanya akan dapat dalam bentuk dokumentasi, then kita boleh reinvent. So berdasarkan dokumentasi, kita akan perform sebab dia for the ritual performances dia ada akad, dia ada rules dia. So we cannot follow the rules of the ritual, tapi kita create a new rules, a new conventions, So in terms of form, they look like similar, very similar form. Tetapi dari segi fungsi, dari segi estetik sebenarnya sudah berubah. So bila berubah tu, maknanya bukan tugas anak cucu cicit dia. Tugas apa? So kita yang berminat lah. Maknanya institusi kerajaan, institusi swasta berminat lakukan dokumentasi and then kita kena reinvent. Yang itu yang perlu dilakukan untuk sustain. Umpamanya macam Mak Yong, hanya satu yang di awarded by UNESCO as a World Heritage. Hanya satu. Sudah berapa lama kita lakukan kajian terhadap Mak Yong? Hanya satu Mak Yong. Kita ada banyak lagi. Jadi maknanya main putri macam-macam umpamanya Olik Mayang hilang habis. Tidak ada lagi. Kita hanya sebut nama dan kita boleh tengok video. Tapi persembahan sebenar untuk ritual performances tak ada, reinvention pun orang tak buat. So begitu. So jadi kalau kita nak sustain, kita hanya setakat ni kita hanya boleh buat dalam bentuk dokumentasi dalam bentuk penulisan ataupun digital. Dokumentasi, kemudian untuk dia kita nampak sebagai a way of life tu, maknanya reinvent tu kena ada performer. Dia kena ada performer. So performer ada institusi lain pula. Umpamanya macam kita ada JKKN, Istana Budaya, even the higher institution also we produce performer as well as scholar. Mana scholar yang boleh perform. Because kita kena guna muscle memory to translate the knowledge. Makan masa. Dia transform the knowledge is a muscle memory, bukannya conceptual. Kita kena guna muscle memory untuk translate the knowledge, the movement, everything. So that is it.
Tadi menurut Dr. Zaimi, masih ada 80% lagi kajian yang belum dibuat. Cuma ada 20% je sekarang. Ya, betul Dr. Zaimi?
Okay, di Borneo, kalau 100%, especially di Sabah ya. Kalau 100%, kita rasa dia hanya dalam 15 hingga 20% khazanah Borneo itu diterokai. So adalah menjadi satu tanggungjawab kita untuk melihat. Kalau saya andaikan Sabah mempunyai suku bangsa sebanyak lebih daripada 32, sub-etnik 80, penutur bahasa dia lebih daripada 100. So bayangkan kalau satu suku itu saja kita buat kajian rumah, berarti kita kena buat kajian more than 100 untuk rumah saja. Jadi sekarang ni, apa yang kita buat, apa yang usaha saya buat, which my students, I have a student in visual arts, in the one batch I think so around 6 to 100. So saya gunakan syllabus. Kita create syllabus in our program more to Borneo heritage. So every batch kita akan bawa ke field di pedalaman dalam seminggu 2 minggu dengan 100 student. So dalam masa yang sama, saya rasa saya maybe next time I can offer Prof Azizi dengan Prof Kipli, sebab setiap kita punya peer research kita akan berjumpa dengan hantu, kita akan berjumpa dengan balan-balan. Sebab Kak Long saya masih hidup. Kak Long saya adalah pengamal balan-balan. Balan-balan asal dia ialah satu diwarisi macam saka, tetapi tujuan dia lah untuk kebaikan. Tapi some researcher, balan-balan dia samakan dengan penanggalan. Bila saya di interview di Singapura, saya nyatakan benda yang betul. Mereka andaikan seperti itu. Tapi sebenarnya balan-balan ni banyak dipelopori oleh suku kaum Cagayan. Suku kaum Bajau Cagayan yang migran daripada Cagayan del Sur di selatan Filipina. Okey, jadi dari segi bahan research, saya berharap Universiti Malaysia Sabah dan rakan-rakan daripada universiti lain, sebab saya rasa hanya daripada universiti yang berminat untuk buat research. Ialah siapa nak masuk hutan nak cari hantu kan? Macam kita punya salah seorang pakar Murut, suku kaum Murut, is not orang Sabah, dia orang Johor. Profesor Dr. Ismail dah duduk kat Sabah 35 tahun. Jangan bercerita tentang Murut, dia tahu daripada sehalus sebenang sehinggalah sebesar Gunung Kinabalu. Dia sampai tahap masuk kubur, gali, lihat apa kat di dalam. Jadi saya berhasrat untuk meneroka seperti dia tentang Bajau Laut. Alhamdulillah, sokongan bagus. So Borneo masih lagi banyak. Bukan setakat adat, kepercayaan, budaya, material culture, tak habis. So jemputlah datang buat research. Terima kasih.
Apa yang dilakukan sekarang Dr. Zaimi untuk memartabatkan lagi kaum Baja Sama? Ya?
Okey, untuk saya nak beri sedikit bagi pencerahan. Di Sabah kita ada dua kelompok masyarakat Bajau. Satu ialah Bajau Sama yang berada ke komunitinya duduk di Kota Belud dan beberapa serpihannya di beberapa tempat di Papar, juga di Kota Merudu. Masyarakat yang tinggal di laut ni, diorang gelar masyarakat Bajau Laut, walaupun hakikat dia Bajau Laut tak suka. Dia lebih suka digelar sebagai AA Sama. Orang sama maksud dia, saya sama, you orang, saya orang, kita sama orang. Lebih kurang macam tu lah. Kemudian masyarakat ini di beberapa tempat digelar oleh penyelidik. Ada yang gelar Bajo, orang laut, orang di laut, orang mari laut. Sebenarnya hakikat dia masyarakat Bajau ni di sini, dia sebenarnya orang yang sama saja. Kalau dia kata dia Bajau Cagayan, sebab dia berasal daripada Pulau Cagayan. Kalau dia orang Ubian, dia berasal daripada Ubian del North. Orang Sulu berasal daripada Kepulauan Sulu. Tapi sampai Sabah dia jadi suluk. Kalau di Filipina dia tidak sebut suluk, dia sebut ta'usuk. Ta'u ialah orang, suk ialah arus. Orang yang mengikut arah arus. Itu gelaran-gelaran lah. Jadi gelaran ni banyak diterbitkan oleh penyelidik. Okey, untuk masyarakat yang ada satu di kawasan Pulau Banggi ni, di kawasan Kudat, untuk mengekalkan, saya memang banyak orang yang cuba masuk untuk membangunkan. Tapi dia datang membangunkan, dia nak musnahkan Bajau Laut. Kenapa saya cakap nak musnahkan? Dia nak robohkan rumah dia, nak buka chalet, nak buat pelancongan. Saya hanya offer, hanya seorang terlepas yang buat dokumentari daripada Channel 5 Singapore. Sebab saya punya syarat, you boleh syuting, tapi jangan musnahkan nature dia. Nature dia, sebab saya berhasrat, cita-cita saya untuk masyarakat Bajau Laut, walaupun usaha saya ni adalah di antara sebutir pasir di pantai, tapi kalau kita tidak mulakan, orang lain tak ikut. Saya akan cuba bangunkan pulau ni tanpa menghancurkan dia punya kehidupan. Saya nak cuba bangunkan eco marine tourism. Tidak perlu cari master diver daripada US, daripada Filipina, sebab Majau Laut lagi terror master diver dia. Kalau kita nak pelihara ikan, merong lagi terror. Jadi saya nak hidupkan suasana itu dan saya telah mulakan start on last year February. Saya buat dengan sea cucumber farm. Sea cucumber, diorang buat sea cucumber, macam-macam buat sangkar, grouper, tiger grouper. Sebut ikan aku terror lah. Aku orang laut kan. Di pulau yang saya buat ni, saya akan bangunkan supaya masyarakat Bajau Laut ni kekal dengan culture dia, kekal dengan rumah dia, dengan life dia, tapi dia ada pendapatan tanpa merosakkan. Sebab pulau di kawasan Bangi ini bukan cerita dongeng lah. Dia sangat kaya dengan lobster, all the species grouper, sniper, abalone, semua benda ni. Sebab orang dah tak teroka. Masyarakat Bajau Laut mula berubah, Earlis, pada tahun 1970, the first candidate for the Adun Bangi ni telah dicolek dan tidak dijumpai sehingga kini. Selepas sejarah itu, bermulalah sejarah Lanun. Maka masyarakat Bajau Laut semua berhijrah, termasuk saya dengan family saya. And then, before my father passed away, dia tell to me, kalau dah jumpa sedikit rezeki, bawa adik-adik kamu balik ke pulau dan bangunkan. Sebab adik-adik saya tidak ada yang berpelajaran, hanya saya saja. Sebab saya setiap kali ayah saya nak ajak ke laut, saya akan lari ke hutan. Last kali apa dia buat? Dia kata tak apalah, tak payah menyelam. Kau ikut je pergi laut, kau tolong masak aje. Saya setuju, sebab itu saya pandai masak. So, apa yang saya akan buat, cuba nak bangunkan tanpa menghancurkan dia punya nature lah. Okay, itu sahaja saya dapat.
Terima kasih. Dr. Azizi, just during your slide presentation, I was quite fascinated with the Bebayo ritual, and we didn't really have time to elaborate on that. So could you share with us, the audience, about what exactly it is and what it entails?
Right. Bebayo is a ritual where the shaman perform a ritual with a lot of offerings. And what he's trying to do is it's not a woman necessarily, it can be a man or whatever, is to heal illnesses or even to ask for good fortunes for the catch in the sea. But when the shaman performed this ritual, the answer came out in the what I call a figure of called Ipo. Ipo is not evil, but it's a reflection whether it's a good evil or a good. There's no good evil, isn't it? But it's evil or a good thing, you know. So if the reflection of these what I call it sicknesses is bad, that means something has to be done better for that, you know, to perform better in order to make it heal for the diseased person. But if it's a good reflection, the Ipo will give you good signage, you know, what to do next. So those are the steps where all this involve offerings. But right now, the Bebayo has died out as well, which is what Kipli said just now. 2 weeks ago when I went there, they said they don't believe in that anymore because of the religions that come in, especially the Christianity and Islam. They forbid all these kind of rituals. But even that now, they're still divided into 3 categories. The Christians, which is a majority, and Islam, and then pagan, which is, I was quite surprised because pagan is such a negative word. But anyway, what I believe is that they practice animism still. These are the people who are practicing Bebayo, the ritual. Yeah. So, but from what I was told again, every year in April they have this called festival where they put everything into the sea, like offerings, push it to the sea. Back then it was for the good fortune, but nowadays all this ritual is for commercial values, where they have karaoke and all those things, you know, dances, all in the field near the coastline. So the practices not being practiced as per se the genuine way. It's all become very commercialized for the purpose of tourism, which again I found as a bit superficial. So that's the story behind Bebayo. And again, it's not necessarily a woman, it can be a man as well, unlike the shaman Bobohizan in Rungus, where it must be a woman. So there's quite a big matriarch society that controlled by the woman.
Just one more question, Dr. Azizi. Now I'd like to talk about the Rorizon Tower.
Rorizon, yeah, the tower.
Rorizon
Okay.
Tower.
Okay.
So what you said earlier was women when they come to a certain age,
16 years old.
16 years old when they can be married off,
All right.
they're put in this tower
Yeah.
and where they can actually look at their suitors.
Yeah.
Yes. So now, are they placed in this tower the whole day, 8 hours, look around?
It's almost like that, yes.
Or the suitors are actually called to this particular premise and gets to view.
No, actually, these people, because
potential bride.
yeah, the community is quite a close community, close-knit. So the man just walk by every day without being asked to. So she can choose whichever man that she wanted to marry off. You know?
And this is still practiced today?
No, no longer.
No longer.
No, because even the houses no longer exist. So the practices is considered as not modern anymore.
Saya nak tambah sedikit ya. Itu rungus atau dusun. Di Bangi Islands dia ada satu bangsa dipanggil Bongi, sebab itu Pulau Bangi terbit. Bongi people dia ada tower juga. Dan saya buku dia sudah terbit. Saudara-saudari boleh beli di Dewan Bahasa. Rumah Bongi tajuk dia saya yang tulis. Anak dara dia ada tower tinggi, dia ada tower hebat tower. Kalau anak dara tu dia datang bulan head, dia tak boleh di main house sebab segala roh-roh jahat akan datang. So dia akan simpan di tower dan dia bila dia berada di atas, dia berada dalam zon suci. So hantu tak boleh masuk. Itu yang saya share lah. Masyarakat ni hanya satu-satunya dusun yang duduk di pulau. Dia daripada suku Bonggian, disebabkan berlakunya asimilasi budaya. Masa zaman pemerintahan awal, dia terbit kepada 3 bangsa. Satu Bonggi, satu Belabak dan satu lagi Kelenyawan. Yang Bonggi ini dia Muslim. Dimuslimkan oleh Tun Mustafa. Lepas tu bila mau balik Kristian, 1880-an datang, satu grup jadi Kristian. Yang satu tidak sempat ditablikkan, so jadi pagan. So dia ada 3 grup. Dalam satu bangsa ada 3 grup, 3 agama yang berbeza. Di pulau wujud sampai hari ini. Dan very expert dalam menyumpit. Okay, terima kasih.
Thank you. I think now we could open the floor to any questions anyone might have for our 3 speakers today. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Sarah, and of course the panelists. It's been very interesting late morning session. I'm very much compelled on the subject of Gunung Sari. I think not kita selalu panggilnya sebagai in Javanese is Tumpal, and kita selalu panggil gunung-gunungan, ya, ataupun dalam bahasa Melayu Pucuk Rebung. It's so interesting that this cultural form has been sustained through our built culture, particularly in our indigenous houses, as well as into our textile traditions. And if you were to look at the manner that has been applied, so the sarong is actually the Garden of Eden, with the embodiment of the sarong itself is the impersonification of the human figure. And when you look at the house as has been projected, the apex of the roof is in a manner of that tumpal, you know, or the Gunung Sari, or the apex of the triangle, it reminded me of the loteng. Think rumah-rumah orang Melayu dulu, dia ada loteng. And dekat loteng itulah dia akan letakkan segala khazanah keluarga. And interestingly too, when you look at the headgears, the material objects of our material culture depicts that very much, as an embodiment of the psyche of who we are. The belief in, if I may quote, the Agama Bumi, maknanya the respect for everything that is in the creation of the divine that has got soul and has got to be respected equally. So that aspects of the earth, kan kita ada 7 petala, as we call it, the layers. It is placed right on the top of the head as our headgear. Lihatlah kita punya tengkolok. Lihatlah juga the crown or the menorah. Kesemuanya pun ke arah pada situ. And kalau saya mengupas kembali kepada the visual language used by Pak Latif Mohidin with regards to his pago-pago, again, you look at the architectural landscape of both the Southeast Asian, we comprise of both mainland and maritime Southeast Asia. Kesemuanya pun berlingkar kepada the same concept of the Tumpal or the Gunung Sari. Mungkin dari segi bahasa berbeza-beza, tetapi dari segi psyche-nya sama. And berbalik juga dengan kefahaman Islam mengenai hablum minan nas, hablum minallah. It is how you put respect to this. Satu dari agama langit dan satu daripada agama bumi, di mana keduanya itu bertemu dan memungkinkan satu lagi enrichment in our culture. Dan apabila saya lihat secara keseluruhan, apa yang paling menonjol pada mata dunia akan budaya bangsa masyarakat Asia Tenggara ini, kalau tidak kepada, pertama, not in hierarchy lah ya, not in hierarchy. Our culture, our indigenous architectural culture, we have been known throughout the world. Kedua, our paddy cultivation, ada yang di valley, ada juga di terrace on the hill slopes ya. Dan apa kurangnya dengan our textile tradition? Dan apa kurangnya juga dengan our prowess of our maritime and our seafaring? So again here, pemaknaan tanah airku itu begitu kuat sekali. Ya. Now, untuk pencarian sesuatu identiti bangsa, kita haruslah melihat kepada sumber siapa kita. And it has been brought up very from different perspective. Kita belajarlah daripada lensa-lensa pengkaji-pengkaji sejarah, pengkaji-pengkaji budaya dan sebagainya. Dan kita akan merumuskan bagaimana harus budaya kita ini dilestarikan dan bagaimana harus budaya bangsa ini diperkasakan, ya. Dan bersama-samalah kita di antara badan korporat, badan akademik, all the advocates of arts and culture untuk bergabung tenaga menjadi satu budaya kolaborasi. I would like to say that, you know. It's a collaborative effort that we put together, not only to sustain, but how we can actually, kata orang Melayu, duduk sama rendah, tinggi sama berdiri dengan bangsa-bangsa yang lain. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Puan Ratna. That was very, very insightful, yeah? Gentlemen. Are there any more questions, please? Cik Anwar Rahman.
Prof. Azizi, I saw your slide on a courtyard house in Melaka. One is the Rumah Morton, is it? Kampung Morton. And most of the courtyard houses in Melaka are at Jonker Street, as we know. Right? We also find some in Penang. In fact, most of the Chinese shop houses have a courtyard at the back. Now, today, courtyard houses, very few and far between. The only place that I know that have courtyard houses are in Bukit Jelutong. So, what are you doing? Is it, is it, because I believe, the ventilation is natural. Hot air will go through the courtyard and goes up. And, well, I live in Bukit Jelutong, by the way, and in a courtyard house lah. And I don't use an air conditioning at all. So, is it something that you as a professor at the School of Architecture in USM are trying to propagate, or is it something that you would like to look into and promote this concept of houses in Malaysia? Thank you.
That's a very interesting question because I'm doing research now on courtyard house in Penang. The fact that it has a lot of cultural influences, first thing first, okay? The philosophy behind it, because it was brought over from China. The courtyard house is because of the extended family in China. It's meant for those who are marrying, so they extended all the houses around the courtyard. So that's how it started. But the way it was brought over to Malaysia, because when the Chinese traders came to Penang or Malacca and they married off the Malay people, they became the Baba Nyonya Peranakan. So they almost like adapted this courtyard effect or courtyard factor into this architecture just to bring in some Chinese influence in that. But it works for practical reason as well. Now you're talking about whether that can be applied in Malaysia. I think that's a $64,000 question you're asking about. Because through research, again, it's going to cost a lot, okay? Because it shows some luxury, it shows some, what I call it, talking about the premium of space area. We have to pay for it, especially when you talk about places in Penang or KL, because of the price of the land is very expensive. Because courtyard needs some space for that. Okay, if you have a bigger space, yes, it can be applied, but with a lot of money involved, because it involves a lot of how to finish up the courtyard area, and also how to make sure that the slope of the roof is okay to get all the wind in or the wind out. Those kind of technical reason that we thought that we can try to maybe apply to commercial buildings rather than to residential because of the costing that involved in that. Yeah, that's why we tried in the architecture school in USM, but still a bit futile effort because of the cost. Yeah, because of people. At the end of the day, it comes down to dollars and cents, isn't it? Well, in fact, that's my PhD student, Akram. He's working on a courtyard house from USM, yeah, in Penang. Okay, I think that's the answer to that.
Thank you, Dr. Azizi. Thank you, Anu. Another question?
Yes, I have 16 questions, but I only limit to 2. The other one is about shaman. Ini Bomo. There are very few now, and many are going to die. And soon we will not have any more shaman available. And it looks like there will be lost communication between the spiritual world and the physical world. So what are we going to do about that? Now, but fortunately also, in the West, I've read through YouTube, which everybody is doing nowadays, we have got an American, Robert Dean, who is an UFOlogist. He read through the NATO UFO paper, and he was able to communicate with alien beings from outer space. And these alien beings, they are in existence with us today. And the dimension that they went through is actually interdimensional travel, not just intergalactic travel. So maknanya, in the West, they already have found a UFOlogist to ganti shaman. So, but in Malaysia, we don't have UFOlogists. So, what are we going to do about this? Thank you. Sorry about, you know.
I think this is a question for
Saya
Dr.
boleh
Kipli.
valid untuk saya dan juga Dr. Zaimi, maybe provide dia. What we can do, we cannot do anything because saka has to be inherited by the keturunan dia, generasi. So when the young generation refuse to receive the saka, we cannot do anything. What we can do is that to document and then to reinvent. Reinvent means that the function is different. Reinvention. So reinventions doesn't involve spiritual characters. It's just purely performance. For macam Dr. Aziz cakap lah, sekarang dah banyak festival. Seorang tahu suka, yes, di Sabah, di Sarawak, they are doing the festival, and the function of the festival is for the performance purposes and tourism purposes. Jadi the ritual purposes for healing semua dah hilang. So there is a contradiction between the performer themselves. Ada yang setuju, ada yang tak setuju dengan perubahan yang berlaku. So bagi kita pengkaji pula, kita nak cari yang authentic. So we want the authentic ritual performances. So kita tengok festival, we can see the issue. So the issue is that they have all the modified material culture involved in there, but we want to see the authentic ritual performances. We have to go and find the real shaman. So unfortunately, only one left. In the case of Ngalai Berasik, but in the case of Kuda Kepang Mabuk, there are still many shamans, but they are performing in silo. Because it's already banned by the Mufti Johor, telah diharamkan untuk dipersembahkan, but pengharaman itu hanya untuk Johor dan it is only an opinion. Bagi fatwa itu macam pandangan lah. So mereka boleh ikut dan boleh tak ikut selagi dia tidak ditandatangani oleh Sultan Johor. So setakat ini Sultan Johor masih belum sign fatwa tu. So maknanya dia tidak terpakai. Maknanya bagi Mufti, sebab hari itu saya dipanggil untuk berbicara dengan Mufti Johor sewaktu pengharaman itu berlaku. So bagi pihak Mufti, saya sudah melaksanakan tugas saya, haram is haram. So bagi pihak performer, because their psyche is still, there is still a belief in animism. Even though they are Muslim. Sama juga yang di Sabah Sarawak ni, mereka sudah Islam dan Kristian, tetapi psyche dia tu masih lagi ada kepercayaan. Sebab itu dia panggil faith healing. When you believe in something, so they believe in that, so dia akan jadilah. So they believe it can cure, it can cure. So you must believe in this, not this. So that is the rules. So itu yang kita boleh buat. Maknanya yang dekat barat tu sebenarnya dia macam sewaktu kajian saya terhadap Kuda Kepang Mabuk dulu, dia macam Da Vinci Code lah. Sebab saya kaji, I'm using a semiotic theory to analyze the trance element in the Kuda Kepang Mabuk. But I found that semiotic itself failed to understand and to read the trance element. So I combine with the metaphysical discipline. So I said, when you believe in the metaphysical philosophy, then you can understand why the dancer goes into the trance. And then there is a code. The code, the offerings lah, the undang-undang. You have to follow the rules. Okay, when you say, if you want to get into the trance, you have to do this process. So the process is the code that you have to follow. First process is here. And then when you want to do the performance, okay, you have to follow what the spiritual characters ask you to do. So I want the offering is this, the pisang emas. If you don't give pisang emas, you cannot get into the trance. I won't come. So meaning that, dalam Islam kita kata hijab terbuka. Hijab terbuka, because when you have that saka, there is a space dalam jiwa kita yang terbuka, and then they can come and go. When you receive the akad, if you don't receive the akad, you cannot get into the trance and you cannot get the saka, and there is no space in your body. If there is a space, sebab tu bila kenapa Kuda Kepang Mabuk diharamkan, because siapa-siapa pun boleh mabuk bila dia menonton. Because if you have in the case of Kuda Kepang Mabuk, if you have the saka, if you katalah kita belajar silat, you have the ism already. Akad. So when orang silat tengok Kuda Kepang Mabuk, there is a tendency to them to get into the trance because they dah panggil. You have the space in the body, so the ism can go into that space and embodied. So Kenapa Mufti haramkan itu? Sebab the main code in the Godam Pahang is the music. When you listen to the music and you hear the music of the Godam Pahang, you will get into the trance. That is why it has also similarities with the Sufism. You know, the circling symbolizes the world. This is when you study, the philosophy behind the performances, and you can see you have to do this circle. This symbolizes the world, and there are 4: earth, fire, wind, and water. And then you have to purify the space first. Yeah, you have to purify, and then you go to the 4 spaces. You create the 4 spaces, so the performer only perform in that space, and the audience is outside the line. Remember, if you read the Ramayana epic, when the Ramayana make a circle and Sita is in the middle. So we can take from that history where it symbolizes Sita, you cannot go out of the circle. If you go out of the circle, you will get into the trouble. And then when Sita went out the circle, and then Ravana took her. So that is the concept. It's almost the same. Because that is the thing. Maknanya yang Barat buat sebab dalam postmodern punya paradigm cuba kembali untuk ke metafizik, tetapi Barat dia tidak sampai ke level metafizik. There is a state of consciousness, the level, level of cosmos. So macam yang datang tu dia ada many different level. Macam I bagi tadi level bawah ada 4 level. So different culture has a different level based on their belief. So maybe ada 7, maybe ada 8. So the dimension is different from different dimension. Macam kita Islam, malaikat dimensi lain, jin dimensi tidak bertemu. Even in here there are a lot of them. There are more than us because they don't die or they live very long, 1,000 over, and they are here in between us, but we cannot see because our dimension is different. So there is no clash.
So these dimensions cannot cross.
They cannot cross.
Yes.
They cannot cross the dimension unless if you have that ability, like a shaman has the ability to go into the dimensions and they can communicate. And which dimension? There are a lot of dimensions. That's it. So, so the code is the sound, the light. That is among the code. The music, I call it sound because it's sound. The sound is, I think because kita bermain dengan gelombang. The spirit characters ini, mereka wujud dalam bentuk gelombang. Wave. See? Dalam bentuk wave. So bunyi, wave dia lebih dekat. So you can call them. Seru.
Seru.
Yes. Yeah? And then you recite the mantra, sound as well. Because dalam hubungan manusia kewujudan, kita mesti ada nama. And when you call their name, they will come. I call your name, you will come. So when we know their names, and they will come. So the process, the mantra is the process to call their name. And then you have to repeat. And then they will come.
So ever evolving.
Yeah.
Ever evolving.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all maybe Dr. Zaimi or Prof.
I hope that answers your question for now. And you can keep the 14 questions for our break afterwards and corner Dr. Kipli. Do we have time for one more question, Ari? Or should we do a summary? A summary, okay. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, once again I would like to thank everyone for being at the talk today. And do stay with us for refreshments. And also, we have another session at 3 o'clock. Meet the artists for visual dialects, of which Dr. Zaimi Sahibil will be a part of. And also, artist Chang Fi Ming from Terengganu. Yeah? So, once again, thank you, doctors. And we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.